repair and connection after conflict in a relationship. Working with Diane Poole-Heller, who's a psychologist, works very closely with Dr. Peter Levine with somatic experiencing, has many decades of experience with trauma, attachment, nervous system. She's a trauma therapist. I interviewed Dr. Poole-Heller. What's coming up for you as you're hearing what she has to say?
How do we become sensitive to misattunements in our relationships? And then how do we initiate repair and also receive repair from other people? That brings us back into building relationship resiliency as we are marching down the road, especially in long term relationships, really an important part of what makes them healthy and sustainable. And John Gottman says if you learn to initiate and receive repair, you have 85% more chance in your intimate relationship of staying in a state of well-being. I mean, if you got an 85% return
Wow.
on your money, you wouldn't even be buying Starbucks or a cup of coffee. You'd be putting all your money in the bank because you'd be making so much benefit from it. So that's why I really emphasize repair. There's huge payoff for learning how to repair. If I was the person who was making the angry comments, first of all, I might want to take some responsibility to do the healing work I might need to do because probably there's some unresolved trauma fueling that. So that if they can, have some compassion towards themselves about that and then do the work they need to do, it can be helpful. Or even that could be in the relationship or that could be in therapy, however they want to do that, the rituals, whatever works. But initiating a repair might just be like, I know I lashed out. And I'm really sorry. I know I hurt your feelings and I did this. And I would be specific about what I did so the person knows that you get what you did, when I said
Okay.
this, when I, you know, whatever, swung a pillow at you or whatever it was that happened. It's good to be concrete about what you feel was off and then not follow it with but I was sick, but I was tired, but I'd worked 70 hours, but the dog wouldn't stop barking. But, you just get rid of that part of the sentence because that sort of negates the first part. And then the other thing is sometimes it takes a lot of self esteem and strength to apologize, to make a repair. So
Mhm.
when you're in your more regulated sense of self, that's easier to do. If you're in the middle of still having a lot of unresolved trauma, you can be pretty fragmented and not have a stable sense of self. And many times people that are in that state really can't apologize or it's unlikely they'll apologize. So if you're trying to work something out with somebody who has a more fragility that because they just haven't healed quite as much as they need to yet, you may need to understand that you're apologizing for your part of it, even if you feel like what the other person did was worse, and you just stay on your apology for your part of it. And this is the hard part. This is really like masterclass level, advanced level. You need to enter into that conversation realizing that the other person may not have the capacity to meet you. They may not have the capacity to own their part. They may not have the capacity to acknowledge or recognize or without going into a shame spiral about what they did. But it's important for our own maturation and growth regardless of what the other person does or doesn't do, to do
Mhm.
the repair because we actually grow and mature and we take that maturity into all of our other relationships. So there's a win in it, whether the other person responds or doesn't, or cuts you off or doesn't allow it to happen. Your one
Mhm.
sided reconciliation is still really important to do. And ideally, I mean, often if you sincerely make an apology, the other person, if they have enough strength of self-esteem, will respond and say, "Well, I really appreciate that, and I realize I did this also," and that sort of thing. But you want to honor the hurt feelings and not go so much into explanation. Like I did it because blah 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 blah. It's more like what I said was really hurtful. Practice and go in with certain intention, and then also realize that it may end up being a one-sided reconciliation, but you're making peace with yourself inside yourself. I mean, when I've made it repair attempts, I feel good that I tried, I
Yeah.
did my
Yeah.
best and maybe I didn't do it perfectly, but I put that energy out there. And even if somebody comes back with even more attack or whatever, I just go, okay, I did what I could do. And I can kind of move on then. I have a sort of peace in myself.
I'll review a couple of those points that she was making. And as we're doing that, let's just notice, how do you feel right now? What's going on in your body? Do you recognize any of those? I know, I think I do. I'm sure everybody has some experience with that conflict in relationships. 85%. That's a big benefit of doing repair work. 85% more likelihood that your relationships will be healthy. Starting with the acknowledgement that misattunements, as she calls it, happen in every relationship. And it's our willingness to repair and to apologize and to connect again that restores trust and resilience. Sometimes we don't have the capacity for repair. We're still in a fight response, or perhaps the other person is. Even one-sided repair brings us some peace, and also it's helpful for us as an adult to take responsibility and to apologize, especially if it's a relationship we really care about. If it's an intimate relationship, how are we going to nurture the trust in that relationship? And then when somebody else wants to repair with us, then how can we receive that, even if we are kind of activated still, perhaps? But that each act of repair, each time we repair, it deepens the trust. Come back into presence and understanding to remember that this is a person that we care about. So it's one of the things that happens in our hearts when we are activated into a survival response. We lose our capacity for self-compassion and for compassion for others. Come back into nervous system regulation quickly as we can. And sometimes we might say, I'm pretty activated right now. Let's take a break for 20 minutes. I'm going to go for a walk. We'll come back to it. I'd like to come back to it, but I don't feel like I could really listen right now. So we can bring all of the tools that we've been working with. If you were to recall something, I always say don't do a 10 out of 10, but sometimes the 10 out of 10 is what comes up. And if that's the case, of course, go ahead and do that. Recall something that's maybe a bit milder. So we want to be able always to stay present in this moment, aware that in this moment, this is what's arising. This is how I'm feeling. These are the thoughts I'm having. So recalling some kind of misattunement where maybe you felt someone owed you an apology. Something was going wrong. There was a conflict. There's two timelines here. So one is what happened at the time. Were you activated into a survival response? And are you feeling that right now as you're thinking about it? We'll take some breaths, relax your forehead, your eyebrows, your mouth and jaw, neck and shoulders. Move around a little if it's helpful. What are the thoughts in your mind as you're recalling it? So sometimes we're still going, but this wasn't right, or but they never did apologize, or but those kinds of thoughts would be quite natural. I'm sure a lot of us have had that experience. Are you angry, or maybe you're feeling defensive? Well, that wasn't fair that they got angry about that. They wouldn't let me explain. How intense is the emotional charge as you're working with this? What are the kinds of thoughts in your mind? And then, either with the same one or a new one, we have this impulse to defend ourselves, sometimes to blame either ourselves or more likely others, or to justify our part of it. How would it feel in this situation to simply acknowledge, I see how I hurt you? Say the first part of the sentence, but don't add the but. But I was tired, but you were yelling at me, but whatever that was. I see how I hurt you. So maybe you said something that was nasty. And the thing about being in a survival response, a fight response especially, is we will often try and take them out of the knees because we are activated into surviving. Sometimes the things we say feel genuinely sorry and regretful. Maybe walk that through in your mind. Bring the other person. You might see yourself as sitting on two chairs facing each other, or just see the other person. What would that be like? Take a few breaths and acknowledge, I see how that comment hurt you. I see how what I said hurt you. Notice how they're receiving it. What are they likely to say? And what are they likely to feel? What's their response to you? And then notice if that activates a need to defend yourself or to get into the but, what comes after the but. So we're just looking to see what comes up. Walk that through in your mind, making some acknowledgement. I see how what I said hurt you. I'm sorry. And notice the thoughts. But you know how angry I get. I can't control myself when I blow my top. Why are you yelling at me in the first place? So notice if you're getting into that. And it's very natural. We all do this. What are the elements? What is the pattern here? Especially if it's someone that you're in an intimate relationship with, friendship, partnership. What are they likely to say? And then how does that land on you? Notice what it feels like in your body. What are the sensations? Yeah, and sometimes they're going to use this against us. Sometimes being vulnerable and taking on our part of it opens the door for them to use that as a weapon against us. And we might go on to say, all I wanted to do is just acknowledge that I know that my comment hurt you. I just want to let you know that. To try to avoid getting into that pattern, maybe they walk away. Maybe they use the silent treatment on you when you say something like that. There's so many different ways that we relate that aren't very skillful. There's probably lots of stirred upness here. We probably have more experiences of difficulty in relationships. At least that's what comes to mind when we think about this. Then we have those really skillful, loving repairs and relationships. That's just kind of how it is for most of us. We get activated into something, we're not showing up as our best self. Let's take a breath and let that one go. We're going to move on to a different one now. Now imagine that you're in a conflict situation, you're having an argument. The other person in the relationship has said something that's hurt your feelings, and now they are attempting to make a repair. What is your response to that? You might bring them to mind as a visual or hear them. I'm sorry that I said that. I know that that was hurtful. I'm sorry. And notice how you respond to that. And notice that in your body as well. What are your feelings? What are your memories too? Sometimes we need to ask for more time. Sometimes we need more time. Sometimes they do. The thing about breaking a pattern is that we need to be aware of the pattern first. And then we can do something like this and sense into what could I do that would change this pattern? And sometimes in a relationship, the other person is not at the place where they can really do this kind of repair work. Maybe the relationship, you're going to put that on hold or you're going to move away from that or something. This kind of work that we're doing is really when we see some possibility of hope. If you're in a relationship, maybe it's a friendship or colleague at work or family, where there's really no hope, the other person's not interested. So we could still, either to them or in our own heart, we could make that acknowledgement. Or when they're apologizing to us, it might not be very skillful. Well, I'm sorry that you felt like that when I. That's not an apology. That's not taking responsibility. And sometimes we might feel manipulated. Maybe they know how to push our buttons so that we get over it and things get back to normal. We don't ever want to pretend that something's different than it is. Accurate neuroception is seeing clearly. This is what I tend to do. I'm still mad. I don't want their apology. They've apologized 100 times for this, and like they can just forget it. If you're in that activated mode, then it's not likely that it's going to help. You might still listen and say, okay, thank you. And I need more time with this. I'm still feeling really hurt. I'm happy that you acknowledged what you said was hurtful, but I'm not ready to just move on. I'm taking some time. So we have a lot of options that we might not realize if we're still kind of too heightened. Doing something like this, we can remember and remind ourselves, okay, that person, when I get into a conflict with them, this is what the pattern is. And this is something that I could do differently now. And I'm going to try that next time. A one-sided repair. So you apologized and it wasn't accepted. Diane Poole-Heller is saying, even if that's the case, it's still good for us to take responsibility and focus on our side of it. So what did we learn from that? I can actually see it clearly. I could make a heartfelt apology without the but I was tired, without any excuses. It's so common that we shame ourselves for having nervous system responses. So this is one way that we could have that experience of, I had a nervous system response. I was in a fight response. I said some things, just having a good look at the situation. But then when we're making the repair, it's just that simple. I know that hurt you. I'm sorry I said that. What happens in us when we are not ready to receive a repair or when we make a bid for connection and it's not well received? What have we learned so far from looking at this in this way? It takes a certain amount of emotional maturity in both people to have this conversation. And this is different from fawning. Taking responsibility, I said something that was hurtful, I'm sorry. That is very different than sucking up, trying to make it better, fawning that often we will do in a relationship after a conflict. We sell ourselves out, we throw ourselves under the bus so that we can restore that feeling of connection. That happens all the time when we're children, and it also happens when we're adults. Take a moment here before we complete this to come into our body. How do we know in our body that we might have a lot of words going on and we might have some pressure we're putting on ourselves of, well, I need to accept that repair or whatever. So each act of repair strengthens our capacity for authenticity, for trust, connection. What does it feel like in your body? So we go from this, we're at loggerheads, to something has shifted and I am willing now to connect again with that person. And if you have a situation that you can remember, you could bring that to mind. It might be a relationship with another person. It might be some interaction relationship within yourself. The inner critic is really going after me, and then I stop and I pause, put my hands on my heart, say, I am really sorry. I'm not going to listen to that anymore. I don't deserve that. The inner critic's not going to apologize, but our adult self can just come into some awareness of that's not okay what was going on there. And I could come back into connection with myself. When we have any kind of trauma, ourselves and the other people involved, and that's going to be the situation almost always. Otherwise, we wouldn't be getting into conflicts probably. So when we have those kinds of situations, one of the things that we can do is acknowledge this is what comes after the but. We're trying to be realistic about, okay, I have this level of activation. When somebody is yelling at me, I immediately go into a fight response or a freeze, whatever that is. This is what's happening in my nervous system. And I have a pretty good idea too what's happening in their nervous system. Someone that we're in relationship, we often have a pretty good idea about theirs. So how do we take responsibility without shaming ourselves? That's a whole other exploration around that. I have a nervous system that reacts in a certain way, and it's my responsibility to work with that. And part of the reason for that is because I want to be in good connection in my relationships. And I know that if I go into a freeze, nobody can connect with me. So I need to bring myself up out of that. And it doesn't have to be in the moment. Overall, the more work I do in my nervous system, the more I heal my own trauma. And a genuine acknowledgement of, yeah, I realize this is hard for you too. When I go into a fight response or a freeze response, it's very seldom one person. It's usually one person's doing something that activates something in the other person, then we go back and forth. So it's not usually just me, it's usually the other person as well. And sometimes it feels like it's mostly the other person. Mostly the other person is not very regulated. And so there's all kinds of things that are happening. With all of that, how can we come back in, take a breath, and be kind to ourselves, realistic about what's happening. We're not pretending that something's good when it's not. We're giving ourselves some honest time to reflect and to work with our own system and to acknowledge, my goodness, this is so hard. Relationships are so hard and they're so worthwhile and they're so hard. That's our situation. We can't help what happened to us in the past, and we can't go back and redo a lot of our responses in the past. And we can take responsibility in whatever way that works for us right now, the way we act out because of what's going on inside. We don't have a lot of control of what's going on inside. It comes up, especially these survivor responses. And then the more mindfulness we have, the more skill we have, the more we do these practices, we're more able to see it and do something to intervene so that we get more clarity and more connection.